Hi, I'm Dustin Gervais, CBS News, and I'm speaking with Peter King, CBS News correspondent, and Leonie, Huddy, our CBS News polling analyst today. So I want to thank you for joining us. So we're talking about Super Tuesday. It's Super Tuesday. So I'll start with you, Peter, first. You're out in Georgia at the Gingrich headquarters tonight. So you got a chance to talk with a few voters. What was the sense you were getting from them out in Georgia today?
Well, I've got to tell you something, and that is that, you know, Gingrich's supporters are almost fanatical, and part of the reason for that is that, remember, he has represented the Cobb County area, the Atlanta area, big parts of the Atlanta area in Congress. He did for about 20 years. And there are a lot of people who've had personal encounters with him, and that's part of the reason why they support him so much, because they've spent time with him. He remembers names. That personal contact really, really helps. But obviously, you know, they agree with him on the issues, and that's why they're supporting him. I did run into a number of people who were Romney supporters, though, who feel that, yes, Newt Gingrich is a favorite son. He's just not their cup of tea. Latest polls here show Gingrich with a double-digit lead heading into Super Tuesday. That's the Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll. Double-digit, but not more than about 40% of the vote. So that's going to be interesting, because with less than 50% of the vote, he does not get all the delegates here tonight, Dustin.
Now, that means, I mean, Georgia is pretty important to Newt Gingrich. He's already said that if he doesn't win tonight, that's going to basically cripple his campaign. So how well does Gingrich need to do tonight to be credible in Georgia?
Well, you know, he needs to win, and whether he has to win by a landslide or just win the way Romney did say last week when he said, well, it was just enough, you know, that's not for me to say. I think that it would look much better for him if he wins 50% or more. I think there are a lot of folks who don't believe that that's going to happen. But you're right about the credibility thing. They have been banking on a Southern strategy here for quite some time, ever since Florida, for that matter. I was there that night when he lost by a landslide to Mitt Romney, and they said, look, we're still going to go on to Georgia. We want to do well in Tennessee. We want to do well in Oklahoma. Next week in Alabama, they're looking ahead to Alabama and Mississippi, which aren't until next Tuesday. But he was already campaigning in Alabama today. Now, he's not expected to do great in Tennessee. He's not necessarily expected to do great in Oklahoma, but he'd sure like to, and he needs to.
Now, Leonie, Gingrich is in a little bit of an awkward position looking beyond Georgia tonight on Super Tuesday. Virginia, his home state where he's currently living, he's not even on the ballot. How did that happen?
Well, you know, I think that that's a problem of some of the candidates who weren't well funded early on, and Gingrich is one of those. They just didn't have the organization and didn't get sufficient signatures to get themselves on the ballot. So that's what a lot of people have been saying, that organization is key here, especially as the race goes into a contest for delegates, that the more organized someone is, the more of a presence they have in a state, the greater chance of at least getting some delegates. So not being on the ballot, I think it's going to be an interesting situation tonight, because if Mitt Romney gets more than 50% of the vote in Virginia, he gets all of the delegates. Now, if there'd been 4 candidates in that race, that would be unlikely. With 2 candidates, it's more possible.
Well, so it all comes down to delegates ultimately, and of course they're going to be voting at the convention later this summer. It's out of Florida. Peter, you're based out of Florida normally. Is Tampa going to be ready for this convention?
No, I think so. They've had a few bumps along the way, and they've had some real questions early on about how the money was being spent. That has pretty much resolved itself. Tampa Organizing Committee seems to be organized. They've gotten a bit more input from the National Republican National Committee. So, you know, there's a way to go until August, but they're working hard at it, and I don't think anybody doubts that they're going to be ready when the bell rings.
No, I didn't. I was looking at it.
We missed a little bit of the end of that, but I think we got the overall impression. So, Leonie, let's look at what outside of the South, maybe beyond that, how are voters overall feeling?
I'd say we're seeing similar things that we've seen in other of the primaries, that people are talking about the economy. that remains the central issue that dominates the conversation. So about over 50% of people talk about the economy as the key issue, and others talk about the deficit. When you take those two things together, that's the bulk of the issues that people are talking about, Dustin. And then when it comes to what are they expecting out of a candidate, many people are talking about a candidate who's able to defeat Obama. And it looks to me like that number is slightly higher than what we've seen in the primary exit polls to date. And I think that may be consistent with the strategy of congressional Republican leaders, which is at this point saying, look, everyone, we've got to get behind a candidate. We need to beat Obama in November. And I think we're starting to hear that increasingly out of Washington. So it'll be interesting to see if that message starts to take hold out there.
Okay, so definitely the economy.
Dustin, I can't hear you.
Impact. In Georgia, Georgia is one of the states where employment is above the national average. Foreclosures are above, they're the fourth most foreclosures in the country. So it seems like that would be a pretty important factor in Georgia.
I think, the economy dominates absolutely everywhere. I don't know that there is any state where we're not going to see that as a crucial issue. How it breaks for the candidates is a different story, and that's what we'll be watching tonight. There are some states where someone who's concerned about the economy may regard one candidate as competent and not another, and that may vary across states. So I think that the drum roll is the same. We've got to worry about the economy. The question for the candidates is who can convince the voters that they're the best equipped to deal with that.
Peter, you wanted to follow up on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back to Florida a few weeks ago because we should remember Florida is practically leading the league in foreclosures along with Georgia, California, Nevada, and Arizona. And the epicenter for Florida for all of this is Central Florida, which voted overwhelmingly for Mitt Romney. Now, whether that has any bearing on any of the other states, that's not for me to say, but I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of people in Florida felt that Romney was better equipped to deal with the sagging economy because of his business sense rather than Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, or anybody else.
And let me add one point to that, Dustin, too, which is about the budget deficit. One thing that we do see that's interesting is it tends to be the Ron Paul supporters who talk about the deficit. So there's even a split there in terms of which aspect of the economy is most important. So it seems like rhetoric about the deficit has taken firmer hold among the Ron Paul backers. But I think Peter is right in saying, in general, we've seen a trend that people who say the economy tend to see Mitt Romney as qualified to deal with that.
Okay, so wrapping up, let's talk about what would have to happen tonight for there to be a definitive winner. How many states would somebody have to win, Leonie, to come out of this and say, okay, I won Super Tuesday?
With four strong candidates across these primaries, it's very difficult, given the way that the primaries are set up, for someone to take a lot of delegates. In some states, a person needs to get 50% of the vote with four contenders. That's exceedingly difficult. So I think that we'll be talking more about this as the night goes on, but if states are more competitive, it's going to make it more difficult for Mitt Romney to walk away with a lot of delegates. If he wins big in some of these states, but again, even winning more than 50% is a very, very difficult challenge. And so to the extent to which he doesn't do that, it's a much more of a proportional assortment of delegates, and so I think we probably won't see him walking away with the lion's share. He'll, certainly win some, as will some of the other candidates.
Absolutely.
And Justin, if I could add something in here, I had a conversation with Newt Gingrich's daughter, Kathy, this afternoon, asked her about that, and she said, look, this is not a march to win primaries, it's a march for the delegates, and that's why the Gingrich campaign and so many people are saying, this thing has a long, long way to go. And quite frankly, it makes for a more interesting story. It makes for a more compelling story. But the thing that I'm seeing and hearing among the voters that I've talked to Leonie, maybe you can verify this, said a lot of them are just getting tired of Republican on Republican attacks, and they're looking forward to more of an attack on the incumbent, Republican versus Obama. So I think voter fatigue actually has been setting in for quite some time. Maybe the debates have a lot to do with that. Maybe the negative ads, you know, a little bit of everything here.
And I'd say that's consistent with an slight increase in people saying, you know, what really matters here is for us to beat Obama. And I think we're seeing that in the polls, a slight increase over the past polls that we've looked at. So I'd say that we're seeing more evidence of that over time.
Is it unprofessional of us reporters to
Absolutely.
say we hope it goes all the way to the convention? Because that makes it a really compelling storyline.
Well,
no,
you know,
I actually, in Florida last time, I had a Gingrich supporter at Gingrich's rally in the Florida primary night say, "You guys want our guy to lose." I said, "Hell no, we don't want him to lose. We want this thing to go on because it makes for a lot of interesting voices being heard. It makes for a lot of viewpoints, and quite frankly, journalistically, it's a terrific story."
Well, I think that
and
the
you know, I'd
two
have
magic
to say
words
that
that journalists...
yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Leonie.
No, I was just going to say that I think
go ahead,
that
Leonie.
we'll have candidates sticking in there, too. I think it looks to me like Ron Paul has an ardent group of supporters.
Yep.
I think we're seeing again tonight that he attracts support from young people. He generates a lot of enthusiasm. So I can't imagine him pulling out anytime soon. And Gingrich looks like he has a certain amount of determination to stick in there as well.
Well, he's saying that he's sticking in there all the way to the convention no matter what. Nobody in the campaign is saying anything otherwise, including both daughters.
Well, I think the two magic words that we're all hoping to hear are brokered convention, because that'll be the most interesting thing we've seen out of a convention in a long time. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining me, CBS News correspondent Peter King and CBS polling analyst Leonie Huddy. I also want to thank the folks behind the scenes, Molly Stark-Dean and Jack Weingart, who got this going for us. And thank you for joining us for this Google Hangout. This is CBS Radio News. Great. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dustin. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Bye-bye.